and welcome to the Edtech podcast this week. I'm your host, Philippa Wraithmell. In today's episode is all about engineering, and what better time than now, with Tomorrow's Engineers Week 2025 across the UK from the 10th to the 14th of November. With the theme Dare to Discover, now in its 13th year, the campaign led by Engineering UK is inspiring young people towards engineering and technology through methods of creativity, curiosity and resilience. Last year, it reached 55,000 students and is growing, with universities like Imperial College London running open lectures and project showcases. With the Royal Academy of Engineering also marking National Engineering Day this month, the stats remind us that there is still work to be done. Women make up just 16.9% of global engineering workforces, with only 9% of our T-level engineering students enrolled who are female. Globally, this aligns with Discover E's Engineering Week as well in the US. So globally, wherever you are, there's something to get involved with. And it's perfect timing for today's conversation on reimagining what higher education looks like, not just in engineering, but in the global and online metaverse worlds. I'm joined today by James Deaby, President and CEO of NMITE, a university in the UK, small by design, challenge-based and employer-connected. Not only that, but we're accelerating learning by a full year with Getting Hands-On. I'm also joined by Dr Thomas Funke, founding president of Tomorrow University, a fully remote global institution built on social, challenge-based and personalised learning, with its mission-driven outcomes for all its learners. So coming up, we're challenging the norms. Not only are we building a work-ready, emotionally intelligent and authentic experience for our learners, but we are challenging assessment versus exams, belonging and teamwork over mass lectures, and modular, stackable, lifelong future for learning. So let's dive in. So welcome to the Edtech podcast. I would love it if you would be able to introduce yourselves and a little bit around why we're on the podcast today. I'll hand to James first.
Well, hello, Philippa, and hello, Thomas. It's great to be on the podcast today. My name is James Deaby. I'm the President and Chief Executive of the New Model Institute for Technology and Engineering, which for the rest of the podcast, if it's okay with you, I'll just refer to as NMITE, because it'll be quicker. We're a specialist new engineering and technology university set up in the UK. It's very unusual for new universities to be set up from scratch in the UK higher education system. So we're really quite a trailblazing organisation doing something genuinely new and different, which I am sure we'll talk about in more detail on the programme.
Amazing. Thank you. And Thomas?
Yeah, hello also from my side. Really looking forward to that conversation. I'm Thomas. I'm the founding president of Tomorrow University. We are a German university, but operating globally. We're fully remote in the sense that we have learners from all around the globe. I think the only continent where there's no learner at Tomorrow University is Antarctica. So it's really, really a nice development that we have taken in the past 5 years. When we speak of fully remote, it's all about challenge-based learning, social learning, and personalized learning. So we're trying to combine these three things that also, I would say, make us unique, but maybe more on that later. By now, we have roughly 1,000 learners. And all of them embark on that journey of trying to really become change makers and start the journey from within and then have an impact to the outside.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much. So it's amazing to hear from higher education for a start that's doing things very differently. James, you just alluded to the fact that it can be very stagnant and static. And I think that is the similar case globally for many institutions. And so being able to do things a little bit differently. Again, James, I'll just come across to you. If you're again a much more traditional set of the arena where you are in the UK, but something doing it very differently. Tell us a little bit about the journey of what inspired the creation of that.
Well, NMITE was inspired to really do two key things, and I think one of those key things is responding to a national problem, and the other is a more regional problem. So the first one, the national problem, is that employers in the UK have been complaining for years and years that the kinds of engineering and technology graduates that the traditional higher education system is producing are just not work ready enough. There aren't enough of them for a start. There's a real problem with getting young people into STEM, science, technology, engineering and mathematics subjects in the UK and then getting them through to universities. So there's not enough of them. They're not diverse enough in the way they think, and actually they're not diverse enough in every sense of the word. They're generally male, and they're generally white, and they're generally middle class, or middle class in the UK means, affluent and better off. So you're not getting a really good diversity of viewpoints. And engineering is inherently, if it's anything, it's a creative subject. It's a problem-solving creative subject. So actually, it's one of those subjects that's really amenable to more diversity of thought, more challenge, more interesting backgrounds. So we wanted to create an institution where, from the very design of its curriculum, its pedagogy, and everything that goes around to support it, would address that key problem, i.e. produce graduates that address those issues. So work-ready graduates that were really good, proficient technical thinkers, but also practically capable and emotionally intelligent as well. And to do that, you have to explore the connections between the engineering and technology subjects that they learn to other disciplines, right outside the STEM disciplines as well. So I was really interested in Thomas's intro, because it sounds like he's doing something similar. We're trying to create really, whole person graduates who are really well-rounded, interesting, socially conscious, ethically minded, technically proficient individuals. So that's mission one. Mission two, the regional bit, is we have been set up in a part of the UK where very, very few people go to university. It's really a left behind part of the UK. As I'm sure you know, the UK is incredibly imbalanced in its distribution of wealth and affluence and opportunity. London and the southeast is, amongst some of the richest places in the world. But if you move out from London and go out into the regions, and we're on the border between England and Wales, then it's a very different picture. So one of the problems with the region we've set up in is that very few young people who are born and grow up here end up going to university and then enjoying all of those life benefits that follow. So we wanted to place ourselves in a part of the country where we were really needed. It would have been easier, frankly, to just set this up in London, but that's not where the need is. There's plenty of higher education and there's plenty of opportunity in London. We've got talented people here, the same number of talented people here as anywhere else. We just don't have the same number of opportunities for them to take. So we're trying to just match some opportunities where the need is. So those are the two guiding principles that set us up.
That's incredible. I feel like, as you just mentioned, alluded to, Dr. Thomas's university, Tomorrow University, is really similar. I think there's a couple of bits there, and I'm sure we'll go into it. But that diverse thinking, problem solving, those kind of attributes, but actually also that global imbalance. Like you talk about regional imbalance, but actually, I kind of want to throw it over to you, Dr. Thomas, that really is global imbalance. What you're doing is helping that shift as well. But do tell us, what's the vision?
Yeah, that's. I think I need the next 45 minutes talking about the vision. No, but I'll try to really be short and also condense it into two main themes. And the one originates also from the word university. And if you think of university in its original meaning, and one of its original meanings, it also means united in diversity. And I think this is the beauty about technology. If you think of a remote first university, can really have global talent and people from all around the globe coming together, and only this pure fact of everyone from everywhere in the world can access the model, that just increases the understanding of the diverse world and the diverse perspectives that it brings, all of the cultural differences, and being exposed to that and having this open, not just mindedness and heartedness is really what this world needs. So that's why, that's what I said earlier, this social learning part, you haven't really seen in any of the remote first universities putting at the top or being put at the top as a primary focus. And that's what we're doing. The community part is really vital here at TUU. Why? Because you've now beautifully seen in the past 20 years that knowledge was digitized. You can access courses from Oxford, Cambridge, Stanford, Harvard. That's the content of it, but it's not really that you're learning in a social environment and embedded and being able to debate, to discuss, to feel each other, to see the mimics and all of that stuff. So focus on community and social. That's that one part. Why there is Tomorrow University. We have a metaverse, we have meetups, we have immersions, and a lot of focus on exactly that. That's the number one reason. The number two, that goes back to the original meaning of universities too. They were very, very much to upgrade our cognitive capacities, to upgrade our skills. Putting it very plainly, what differentiates us from other species on this planet, it's our cognitive capacities. That's what we use to build tools, to think critical, analytical. We believe it's now time to go beyond just the cognitive capacities. And you can see that, right? It's not only about being smarter. IQ is not the only thing that you actually need to measure. It's a good thing to have. It's great that we have focused so much on this. We've developed many great things, but we at the same time have forgotten some of the other domains, such as the emotional intelligence. That's what James also said. How do we collaborate? How are we empathetic and how do we communicate with each other? And all of these elements that are more than just cognitive capacities, they have fallen short in many of the university curricula that you have seen. Also the somatic part, right? And systemic intelligence as well, if you think of sustainability as a whole. And this is what we try to embed into the curricula and bring back to the curricula. So it's really a community of learners where there's not a two-class system of the professors being the smart ones telling everybody else how the life should look like. But it's everyone learning together in diversity. And then secondly, it's really doing that beyond the cognitive capacity. That's not the vision. That's the reason for why we're here. I can tell you more about the vision if you're interested. We have very concrete thesis on how the world will look like in the future, but we can go there later if you like.
Amazing. It's wonderful. And I love that idea of, and you're so right, it's about upgrading our cognitive capacity. I think, when we go to university, we should be studying disciplines that we're passionate about. So for instance, if we're going to James's university, we would want to be becoming engineers. We would want to be those creatives of the future where we're bringing all those things together. And just that idea of emotional intelligence as well. I hear this all the time, and it's something that is so important within the world of education, but also within transformation, where we're looking now at a world that is being taken over by AI and it's being used responsibly and irresponsibly. But what it comes back to is that learning of emotional intelligence, that we are humans and that is what we'll always have above everything else. And so building those back in, but with the right ways and the right elements. And I think that's so important. I think coming back to kind of, that idea of new contexts and new models of universities, I think, what are the biggest things that you hear from your cohorts about the difference that it is making to them? So, Thomas, for instance, let's carry on with you. Like, where do people, your students, say that it enhances them the most compared to university courses they've done before?
So the first thing, what I always hear, because we start our university courses, every single one of them, with a course called Mission Identification. And then learners embark on a so-called mission journey. They have mission groups that assist them. The next challenge is also very much about building your community of supporters for your mission. So there's a very coherent journey throughout that is personalized and that is tailored based on your interest, but also based on what you actually want to learn. And this is one thing that surprises the majority. I mean, they understand it because we communicated that up front, but they're like, wow, this is not somebody telling me the job looks like this in 4 years, and now you need to just learn these skills and then you will land this job in 4 years. No, it starts within. It starts with you. It starts with you identifying what you care for, what your values are, where you actually want to go, in which direction you want to go. So any impact that you have starts with inner growth. It starts with inner engineering. And I think this is what so many really love, is this not only reflection, but reflection turned into action. So it's not this, I'm just reflecting. I'm turning that into action, purposeful. That's that one part. And then the second part, that's what our learners continuously tell us, is this, wow, it's incredible to come into a community full of hope and full of compassion. But it's not a community that is full of, I would say, competition, where it's like, oh, if I don't master this, then I just need to do it better than the others because there are no grades at TUU, for example, right? It's a community that does things together, and that sees that the pie is bigger if you do things together, and it's not just about your individual pie of it. And I think that's the two. And there's many, of course. I mean, I'm also biased, I must say, because I love TUU and I love listening to positive feedback. But you know what I mean. But the community part is very strong. Why? Because they find like-minded and like-hearted individuals that also want to have an impact based on their mission. So if you ask me what's two things, that's the two.
That's incredible. And James, over to you in terms of your students and that real hands-on, and we'll come to why your course is a little bit different in a moment. But what are the sorts of things that you get in terms of feedback from your students?
I recognise a lot of what Thomas was talking about, but we're doing something similar. I mean, Thomas talked about he wants his students to take action. We have something that we describe it as a bias to action. So whilst we want our students to be able to think and to ponder and to reflect, we want them always to be action oriented. We want them to do things and be able to do things and be confident enough to do things, including taking the risk to do things. So our program is designed to create the kind of conditions where they can safely fail, learn from that failure. But the most important thing is that they do things. The other thing, I think, that there's the other key word for ours is integration. So it's very, very important that our students can just become conditioned to see the connections between things. We don't want them to try to solve problems in very narrow disciplinary boxes, because problems in the real world are very rarely present in that way. And that's one of the criticisms we have of the higher education sector in the UK generally. In engineering, you're trained to be a mechanical engineer, but most mechanical engineering problems have all sorts of other engineering implications and non-engineering implications that to make them work. So we want our students to be thinking about integration all the time. Our course is inherently practical. So again, along with that bias towards action, we want our students to make things. So they generally produce in their assessments and their coursework and their, and as they progress through the course, they generally produce tangible outcomes, things like machines that actually work because they've learned how to do all the, to make lots of components integrate and work properly. Of course, it doesn't work if they don't integrate. So that's a key discipline that we want them to learn. They gain a lot of confidence in dealing with employers and industrial partners, and they gain that very early, and that's a very important key difference. So when a student joins NMITE, they work on, we have challenge-based learning as Thomas does, but what that means for us is that we work with employer partners who come into our studios, co-create our curriculum with us, and then we deliver the learning for students, or students acquire the learning via the practical activities they do with those partners. What that means is they get used to the rhythms and patterns of a workplace, to the kind of idiosyncratic and often quite demanding requirements of clients, and who are not academic tutors. And it means it's not a crashing shock when they stop being a student and start being an employee at the end of their journey. And that's really important. And it means we can make an offer to employers that if you recruit one of our graduates, they will be adding value to your business at a much earlier stage than another graduate who might need a 1 or 2 year graduate training program or induction process that's very costly and inherently more risky, the greater risk of failure. So our students learn that too. The other really important thing, I don't want to go on for too long, so I'm sorry, but like Thomas, I'm very passionate about this whole thing and I could talk for hours. The other really important thing is teamwork. So our students learn how to work in teams. We assess in teams. We don't really want students who are loners and who work alone and who will then go off in the world and work alone. Actually, we wouldn't be the right place if that's your preferred learning style. But what that means is the first line of support for every student and the first port of call in terms of academic tutoring for every student are your fellow students. That's incredibly impactful, and it contributes a real acceleration to learning gain as well. I was watching a bunch of students in one of our studios just a week or two ago, and these were new students who'd only been with us for 8 weeks, and they were one of the individuals in the team was trying to do an equation on a board and got stuck. And instead of looking up to the tutor, the 3 teammates were standing around the board with her, and she looked up to her teammates and they solved the problem, and then she carried on. Just every now and then you catch a glimpse of something like that, and then you think that's the model working.
That is lovely. I really love that story as well, just because that is exactly what you need people to know how to do in the real world, is collaborate with one another. I think these hands-on skills, and you're so right, the integration and working with real companies brings that tangible level to everything. And actually that brings me really nicely to Dr. Thomas. A lot of the work that is done at the university is based around the person's passion and the person's kind of goals and objectives. Tell us a little bit about that, because I feel like there's quite an alignment between the 2 universities.
Yeah, so the one part that we're doing is we're trying to center everything around what interests you, but also what you think your calling is. So if you think of it as universities used to prepare for jobs, right? If ideally, then they also prepare for careers, that it's not just a job that pays your bills, but it's also a career. But ideally, it's an impactful career. It's a career that actually has a meaning to you and where you can have an impact. And if you look at the most recent studies, they all say highest performing teams, they consist of individuals that feel that they have a meaning and that they feel that they have an impact. And this is literally what we're trying to center everything that our learners learn around. So it should be really about what they care about. But then this is, as James said it, in a context, in an environment, and with a team. And it needs to be collaborative. It doesn't need to be selfish. And when we say mission identification, we also don't mean it's about changing the world. It's first and foremost changing yourself. So this is the one part, but that wouldn't be enough if you just reflected, if you just asked yourself these questions and sat down and thought. It needs to be turned into action, because only when you act, you actually learn. You're able to reflect based on your action. You need to make mistakes. You need to be able to get feedback. And this is what we call challenge-based learning, because it's not about you reproducing knowledge. It's you literally trying to solve problems. And those problems can be personal, or that projects can be personal, such as, for example, the mission identification challenge, but they can also be given to you by practitioners. We have corporate partners, large soccer club in Germany. I would call them the best, Eintracht Frankfurt. No, I'm kidding. What they actually came to us with is they said, we have a problem every weekend, which is navigating the fans to the stadium. There can be a need to be way more sustainable solutions. We're bringing 60,000 people for one event to the stadium. What are options? What are thoughts and ideas that you have as outsiders that could bring us further? And then students engage in a project like that. Or a large logistics company says, we want to reduce CO2 when delivering our parcels. And this is challenge-based learning. It's not only based on what is it that I want, but also what's relevant to the world, to have this bridge or closing the gap, literally, I would say, to not have the ivory tower of the university where you're just learning theory and just talk about yourself. No, you're actually working on things that matter. And like this, I think you learn best, connected with your purpose, but then also practically relevant and actively doing things.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And I think it's that meaning and impact. And James, you mentioned earlier that ability to fail without feeling like it's going to be the end. It's going to be that kind of safety of that community that is around you. And I think if we come back to kind of that idea, that flexibility and relevance of both of those, James, for your cohorts, especially when they're university first degrees potentially, do you find that safety allows people to feel that they belong as well? Like you mentioned, it could easily be in London, it could easily be anywhere, but you are serving demographics and proportions of the UK that are not necessarily as wealthy. How do you find that sort of element of it and that social demographic?
Well, the sense of belonging is, I'm just difficult to overstate the importance of that in the model. So one of the problems with the UK higher education sector is something we often call massification. I mean, universities have become massive and the student populations have become massive, and the the student staff ratios have become very big. So it's not uncommon for 300 or 400 students to be taught in a lecture theatre by a single academic at any one time. It's very easy to get lost in those in those kinds of conditions. It's very easy, although you're surrounded by nothing but people, it's very easy to feel quite lonely, actually, in those kinds of conditions. So we've always said that NMITE will be small by design, just as a reaction to that. And that smallness is an incredibly important part of the model. So we're very confident. I know almost all my students by name, and all of our tutors know all of our students by name. So we really make it a mantra that we want every one of our students to be known by name and to know that they matter as well, because that's incredibly important. And there's an awful lot of concern in UK higher education that ranges from just general homesickness and loneliness of students who leave home and go to these very big institutions to the more severe end of the problem, where there are very significant mental health problems with students in those kinds of conditions. We're not creating an emotionally healthy generation of graduates, and whatever your employment outcomes, I mean, that's just a fundamentally basic thing that we ought to be able to do in higher education. If we do anything, we ought to be able to produce individuals who are comfortable in their own skin and confident about the choices they're going to make. So small by design is a really important part of our model. And I'd come back to the teamwork thing. I mean, our students work in small teams in small studios, so there's a feeling that there's people who know you around you all of the time. There are a lot of young people in the UK that want to go to big cities and enjoy, all of the extra facilities and infrastructure and crowds and social life that you get in a big university. And we're quite honest with students that want those things. We're probably not the right choice for them, but we're just a choice. We add choice to the sector. And I think both models could work, but you have to have more choice so that they work for everybody.
Absolutely, definitely. And talking of choice, I remember one of the reasons that I chose one of my courses at university was because there were no exams. Because as a student, I get very stressed out. I get really nervous around examinations, and I found out actually at university that I was dyslexic, and a lot of that kind of seemed to make sense to me a lot better. That kind of blank memory, not really understanding, everything disappearing from my brain. In terms of assessment, I mean, Thomas, you've kind of gone a little bit into this in terms of the fact that you don't have necessarily assessment as what we might know it as. Talk to me a little bit about how you allow someone to graduate. Like, what does that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, so first, I think, and this is what I haven't talked about, I need to elaborate a bit on our competencies. So we have a competency map, which is derived from the 21st century competency. I think, James, you talked a bit about it. One of them being the social emotional intelligence part, but then also self-empowerment, sustainability thinking, entrepreneurial spirit. So we have these competencies and we have them on different levels. So we do assess, but the assessment is not a finite grade where we would say, now, Philippa, you're a 3, and compared to me, you're better. So I get feelings of, oh, wow, I'm actually not a worthy human. No, the idea is that you actually get feedback in order to improve, right? So you're doing an assessment in that sense, which is not an exam. So it's not that we want you to read a book or an article and then we just check your knowledge. No, you're, for example, submitting your mission statement. I talked about the mission identification. You're submitting that, and then you're getting feedback on what could be expressed more clearly and how others did it to be inspired by that, right? So, for example, one of the skill dimensions is how concise are you in articulating your mission statement? And then you're getting that feedback and you're getting some suggestion what could be done better to reach the next level of the competency. But it's not a grade where you say, oh, you're an A student, you're a B student, you're a C student. No, you're at a level and you can improve that level. That's the overall logic, is that we have competencies attached to every module, to every challenge, and then you're getting feedback and you can improve based on that feedback.
And from that, how have careers developed? How have other companies who maybe have taken someone on, or although I kind of feel like there's a much more entrepreneurial vibe around the university, how has that been seen by people who potentially are more in a traditional set or mindset?
We haven't had any questions around on grading or anything alike. So what you can really see is that also what gets less important is the brand that you have worked for, but more why you're doing things, more the motivation and your adaptability. So this is one of the things, and this is, I mean, part of the competencies of the 21st century. The motivation becomes more important, but then also who you are as a human. I personally, but I cannot say that this is already true, I personally would love to see CVs replaced by skill prints, for example, where you actually show this is what I am capable of doing, and this is my areas of growth, and so on and so forth. And this is what I have learned in terms of skills, but not in terms of what are the brands that are on your CV. But I think we're a little further from that. But it's interestingly going in that direction, that motivation is becoming way more important, as well as the actual skills, the actual competencies that you bring.
And I think that is so vital, isn't it? Of looking at, again, we've mentioned failure, but actually, what did that teach me? What skills did I learn through that? What did I inadvertently gain from being in that scenario, in that situation, and having those challenges face me? Actually, as a person, you grow so much more, and that ability to connect that with your drive to do something and your purpose is amazing. And James, yours is much more hands-on. I mean, I did an engineering diploma as part of my postgraduate degree. I love engineering. I think it's incredible. Taught lots of children at BTech level instead of A levels and things like that. It's phenomenal. Vast amount of information, but you said it's very hands-on. Like, how do jobs and employers see that? Because a lot, as you mentioned earlier, do see graduates coming to them and then think, oh, I'm going to have to spend 2 years training them. I'm going to have to do this. I'd actually rather have an apprenticeship straight from school. How is everything different for you at NMITE?
Well, I mean, the question started on assessments, and didn't it? And I very much echo Thomas's view that we should focus on skills rather than credentials when we're talking about what makes up a person and what they can do. So we very strongly encourage our students to build portfolios of the assessments they do, because they're so skills based. So they're creating a kind of skills passport rather than a CV. I'm just entirely couldn't agree with Thomas more on the points he made. So our assessments are hands-on and practical. We describe them as authentic assessments. So instead of doing a written paper in a 3-hour in a 3-hour session in a room where you're not allowed to talk to anybody, and you're given the questions and you have to just answer them cold in a extremely stressful 3-hour setting. And Philippa, you're not the only person I've come across who says I prefer not to do it that way, or I'd prefer to demonstrate what I know and what I've learned and what my skills are in a different way. You're really not the first person. I mean, that's just an underpinning part of our philosophy as well. So those authentic assessments allow students to demonstrate what they've learned through a range of other means. It might be that they produce some artifact that an industrial partner would recognize. It might be a prototype, or it might be a circuit board, or it might be an industrial report or a presentation. So we have about 18 or 19 different modes of assessment. If you're really, really rubbish at presentations, then you might not score high on the presentation bit, but you've got a really good chance of demonstrating your knowledge through one of the other modes of assessment and getting a good grade, because you will still be a good engineer. Not everybody is good at everything. So that authentic assessment is really important. And to your second point, how do employers view this? Well, we're quite a new university in the UK, so we're pretty obsessive about demonstrating the rigor of our program and the academic quality. We may overcompensate a bit on that, but it's because we're very sensitive to the need to demonstrate the academic rigor, because we're a new model. So we have very, very in some senses quite traditional, but we have quite strict quality assurance. We use external assessors and we audit our quality quite rigorously. So if you get a degree from NMITE, you can be as confident as you can be that it has the same level of learning and rigor and value, in my opinion, of course, as a degree that you would get from any other Russell Group UK university. But what you will be is much more practically skilled and much more socially conscious and much more rounded. That's what we believe.
Which really is what we hope from everybody, isn't it? To be more well-rounded and have those social skills and feel confident enough to be able to do the job at hand. I think that's amazing. And you mentioned time there, which is brilliant, because traditional degrees can take years. Lots of companies will require for you to become a certain level, you also must do a master's and all of these different things. And interestingly, when I think of engineering now, I also think that there's that route, obviously, through apprenticeship. There is a route through university. There is a doctoral route as well. How is your course different? Because there is a time element there that can be supported.
Well, in an NMITE, time is very important. It's an absolutely vital, costly resource that we simply can't waste. So a traditional university undergraduate degree in the UK, and about 90% of students do it in this model, takes 3 years. Now, I would argue that's pretty much 2 years worth of content spread over 3 years. That 3 years includes an awful lot of downtime, an awful lot of long holidays, an awful lot of students rattling around a campus between modules for hours at an end, a lot of the time. It's no surprise that university buildings are not used more than sort of 30% of the time. It's a very inefficient model, inefficient in use of resources, inefficient in the use of time, and it's a very kind of elongated, stretched out model. We just wanted to turn that on its head, so we accelerate all our programs and just squeeze them and deliver them a full year shorter than it would take you in a traditional university. We do that by reducing the holidays, by making our students work Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, on the work that we've been describing earlier. Now, that's important because it saves time, but it has massive pedagogical benefit too. It allows much greater immersion in learning because you're doing it all day long. If you want to learn how to play the piano, the best way to do it is to do an intensive 2 or 3 week course and just do it all day, every day for 2 or 3 weeks. That's a much better way of doing it than doing it 1 hour every Wednesday afternoon over 6 months. Your learning gain will be faster if you learn in that way. So that's our approach. We want our students to immerse themselves completely, full time, all the time, on each module, and the learning gain is so much faster. And the other outcome is that, you've saved an awful lot of time. So that saved time is a year off your degree, a year quicker into industry, earning money and paying off your debts, which incidentally are about a quarter or a third smaller than they would otherwise be because you've spent a year less doing it. So time is really important.
It's so vital, especially when people are looking at the escalating costs of higher education and university. And that's really interesting. So that we go to the juxtaposition of, well, Thomas, you've got a metaverse, so cost of buildings is not quite the same. But what's your perspective on that side of things, of time?
Absolutely. First, there's one statistic that I would like to quote a bit German speaking, but James, you said like 30% of the time the buildings are actually used. If you think of the offices of professors, the number is even more terrifying. It's only 5%.
Oh, wow.
So they're empty for 95% of the time. But that's on another note. And if I think of time, this is one of the things that are really haven't come up with a way better solution. But if you think of how credits are measured in the university system, it's ECTS, right? And it's measured by time. 1 credit is actually worth 25 hours. And this is what you actually then have to have on your certificate in order to graduate. I personally believe that time is not a very good proxy. It's a proxy, but it's not a very good proxy for learning. So there's different ways of learning. One would be, such as James just said, a sprint and learning one specific skill. Another would be how intense you actually deal with it. But at the same time, it also depends very much on learning style, on your personality, right? So if I spend 25 hours doing one thing, that does not mean that I'm at the same level as someone else who started at the same level as I was. Because maybe I have a way stronger passion or a predisposition to actually learn that one skill. I understand that time per se is a proxy, but if possible, I would literally be able to erase it completely. Because I am also a believer in the 100-year life. And now me saying that as a university that awards degrees, but I don't believe in the full future of degrees. I believe in the near future, in the next 10, 15, 20 years, degrees will have the same importance, but decreasing. If we think of the 100-year life, we're not just being educated, then working, and then retiring. it needs to become lifelong learners throughout. So we need to continuously upskill, continuously develop in order not only to be relevant, but also for ourselves. We're driven by curiosity as humans, right? It's not this outside perspective. It's also the inside perspective. And I would love to see the education market reflect this, that there is actually this philosophy of you learn skills whenever you need them. And it's not just at the first third of your life that you're going to school and then higher education. No, you're learning throughout. No matter what time, you're actually learning day in, day out. So companies need to evolve and change too, right? They need to become learning institutions. We need universities within organizations in that sense, right? And not have something separate. But that is more like a long-term thing. And we won't see that change in the next 5 to 10 years, but at some point we will.
No, and it's really interesting, actually. I had a conversation with Lord Jim Knight from the UK, who was talking around a really similar thing of these lifelong learners, because of the fact that we, like you say, we're now changing jobs, we're changing roles, we're working longer, we're realizing that we don't have to do the thing we were told at 16 we need to do. Our desires have evolved into different things. That actually what we need to be doing, and it actually links really nicely back to what you were suggesting around the skills-based framework, is actually looking at what your next role is and going, okay, I have 5 of the 7 skills. So how do I do something extra from my learning that can get me those skills, that can get me that job, because that looks like my next thing. And so it really is about that evolution of education. And that's really interesting to come back to, as well as a point of how do you feel like two quite different but still very trailblazing in their own right university entities, how are you being able to disrupt what is already happening? I know, you've said about how it will take time, but you are starting to push the gauge. You are starting to disrupt that. So what do you think people are seeing and taking away from your structures?
That's a really good question. I think we are definitely generating interest from traditional universities who want to explore one or other elements of our model and the degree to which they might be transferable into their institutions. So there's that going on. And I have to say, because we remain, we're educators, so we're always curious, and there's a direction of travel the other way as well. We're quite happy to, copy ideas that work in other areas as well, even in the traditional sector. So we're not anti the traditional sector, but we are seeking to disrupt it a bit. I think reform, very fundamental structural reform in UK higher education, is something whose time has now come, for all the societal and economic and political reasons that we've been talking about earlier. So I think that we are demonstrating a model where a university can have a much more regional impact. UK universities tend to have a national and international focus, whereas schools and colleges tend to have a regional focus. So we're offering an opportunity for a university to take a much more regional focus to what it works with. And that means you can embed yourself in the local industrial ecosystem in a much more aligned, much more tailored, designed way, and that's very important. So it's quite similar to a lot of German approaches, where that alignment and integration between educators and industry and the journey that students follow from education to industry is much more seamless and smooth in Germany than it is in the UK. So I think that's important. I also think the credentials that universities produce will change in the next 10 or 20 years. The standard classic degree, that 3-year undergraduate credential, I think will gradually be chipped away. It'll take longer in the UK than in Germany, in my view, and that's just because the UK has just a much greater affinity to formal credentials. That is why A-levels remain as the gold standard for that level of education, and all other things that have come in to challenge it, like T-levels and B-levels and apprenticeships, have not overtaken it or not disrupted it that much. A-levels remain, and that's because they have that high level of esteem in terms of as a credential. So that's hugely important. I also think that the degrees will change and become much more flexible, modular, and stackable. I envisage that people in 10 or 15 years' time will have a degree that they will have acquired from 2 or 3 institutions in modules at different stages in their life, possibly over 20 or 30 years, because they may have 2 or 3 careers in between learning. The learning will be to change careers, and they'll just sort of acquire and gather credits that way. And that will require very significant reform in the sector, because we simply don't have the embedded automated mechanisms to recognize credits as they transfer between institutions to know what degree you're getting, who's awarding the degree. So all of that will get kind of forced into change, I think. We've built a pedagogy that's very amenable to that. Our modular based block learning is very lifelong learning ready, and that obviously is not a mistake or an accident. We were trying to get ready for this new world of skills focus and portfolio careers and shorter careers and constant retraining. So that's where we are.
So you asked what will help drive the change, right? The one thing I believe is trying to be one of the pioneers. Certainly not the pioneer, but I see so many more institutions currently paving that way, which is, I think, great, and continuing that path with courage and resilience, and no matter the resistance that you do actually get. I can tell you lots of stories of resistance from accreditors, but not only from accreditors, also from other institutions and all of that. But I think it's just to continue to pave that way because others follow. If you look at the university landscape when it comes to challenge-based learning, problem-based and project-based learning, that was at the very beginning condemned as not real learning, right? And then universities already 20 years, 30 years back shifted totally towards, maybe it was called problem-based learning at that time. And they were laughed at. And now other universities try to understand, how do you do that? So they've become places of inspiration, but at first they were laughed at. And I think this is the being, or that means being a pioneer. That's one thing. And the second thing is, how can we change? I think it also needs a systems change. And that's why we as a university, we now have that university system in place, but still we're governed, of course, and we need to adhere to these governance rules. But at the same time, we're in dialogue, right? We're on eyes level now with them. And this is where you also see change when it comes to the accreditors. And I think that's vital. What we need is more systems change to also rethink. For example, what's the priority of research versus the priority of teaching? Does every university need to do research? There's publicly funded universities in Germany that enjoy academic freedom a lot. They have the resources to do research, right? That also leads them to not focus too much on teaching. Which is so sad for the learners, But then there's other universities that really focus on the applied part, on the teaching part. Do they need to do research, or do they use the research that others do? So we need a systems change as a whole.
Absolutely. And it's really interesting you bring that up. I was discussing with a professor in Saudi Arabia the other week when I was on a panel there, and he is a professor at one of the universities there, and he said, I'm not doing research anymore because we research, we do nothing with it. And I want to be with students going, okay, let's see if this piece of research that someone else has done, see if it works. Let's see if it works in this context. Let's see if it works in a different way. How can we unplug it all, and how can we try and actually use the research and start to really develop that. And I think, that just goes with your staggering figure of 5% of professors being in their office as well, because they're all off researching everywhere. I think it's been a phenomenal discussion in so many different ways, and we've covered so many different elements and topics, and that policy side of it, I think, is a huge piece of reform that globally is needing to be done and hopefully is shifting. But I'd like to ask you both the same question in terms of, as a final question, to say, for those educators listening who maybe have students who don't know what to do, don't know their options, or maybe even a teacher, educator who's thinking, I want to do something, but I don't know what because the normal routes don't fit me. What would you say to those people to encourage them to keep learning and to keep looking for how to learn differently?
Very simply, I would say take the mission identification course at Tomorrow University. it's free as a trial for everyone. No, but on a more serious note, I think to be comfortable with exactly that state of not knowing. That's the beauty, because you'll never know, right? There is this myth of, when I was 3 years old, I knew I wanted to become a doctor, and then I became a doctor, and I lived fulfilled for the rest of my life. That's just not the case, right? Being on that quest and bringing that curiosity to continuously search and to try out different things and to go for things that may be wrong, and you're realizing, and that's the second thing, you're realizing to also make it's wrong, and you make the decision to not pursue that path anymore. That's one of the most powerful things that you can do, I think, in the 21st century. You have a lot of options and a lot of opportunities, but you also need to walk that path and to be able to say, no, that's not my path anymore. I go to the next.
Well, for me, like Thomas, I'd say come to an NMITE open day and find out more about a new model doing things in a different way if you think the sector isn't right. But I mean, more seriously, I always tell young people to do what they're passionate about, whatever that is. I also tell them not to worry about making the wrong choice or making a mistake. It doesn't matter. I mean, I think that we're all going to have to get used to a world where we retrain several times in our career, where we become lifelong learners. So it matters an awful lot less what you do at 18 or 21. So just try something new.
Amazing. Okay, I'm going to add one more into that just at the end, because I was going to ask you how people would get in touch with you, but I'll leave that until a second. What would you give as a piece of advice to other universities looking to do things a bit differently?
Challenge the status quo. I really, really believe that everyone, and this is including us, now we've built a system as well in the past 5 years, and it works. But we all need to learn as humans to continuously challenge our core assumptions. If something works, and if something works really well, that does not mean that it should be like that for the next couple of years, right?
We built a system in the UK that worked for decades and decades and decades, one of the best systems in the world, but it's not working now. It's broken. So if you're working in the traditional sector, you're probably in a pretty fragile position at the moment because the sector is so challenged. So again, try something new and be brave enough to innovate. There's plenty of room for innovation. There's so much homogeneity in the UK. It's absolutely crying out for innovation, new models. Try it.
What a wonderful way to end the podcast. Thank you so much. Thomas, please tell people where they can connect with you or find out more about Tomorrow University.
Yeah, so tomorrow.university, that's the website. And as said, I really meant it. The trial challenge is a magical experience. It's a 3-week experience. In case somebody wants to find their mission, please feel free to try it out. But if you don't have the 3 weeks, then I'm also happy to be in touch over LinkedIn, for example. That's the platform that I'm reachable best.
Wonderful. James?
You get to NMITE at nmite.ac.uk. You can book yourself on an open day. The next one's on November the 22nd. Like Thomas, I'm personally reachable via LinkedIn and delighted to be connected to anybody with an interest in this and to talk to them as well.
That is fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us on the Edtech podcast. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you.
Thank
you, Philippa.
And that's a wrap. Today we heard how NMITE's Bias to Action, employee co-created challenges, small studios and authentic assessments help students integrate disciplines, fail safely, belong and graduate sooner and more work ready. We also explored how Tomorrow University's mission identification, no grades competency feedback and global social learning turn reflection into action inside a supportive community. As Tomorrow's Engineers Week, 10th to the 14th of November lands, here's the challenge to all of us. Classroom, lab, or leadership, dare to discover ways to make engineering more visible, creative, and inclusive, tackling the diversity gap and opening multiple pathways in. And want to explore more about how you can do higher education or potentially your own lifelong learning with Tomorrow University, taking their challenge and making it personalised to you. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the information on whether it's an open day at NMITE or a trial challenge, which is available for free at Tomorrow University. I'm Philippa Wraithmell. Thanks for listening to the Edtech podcast. If you've enjoyed today's episode, don't forget to follow, rate, and share the Edtech podcast wherever you're listening. It really helps us grow and reach more educators and innovators around the world. We'd also love to hear from you, your thoughts, questions, or even your own stories of change in education. You can leave us a voice note on SpeakPipe. The link is in the show notes. And we might even feature your message in an upcoming episode. And of course, you can find all our links and show notes and resources at theedtechpodcast.com.